Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's so exciting when we see all the participants climbing. What are you going to say, Jalissa?
No, I was just about to say the same thing. No, good morning, everyone. I always like seeing those numbers go up for the participants.
Yes, absolutely. Hope you all are ready to make some puppets today and to learn about some activism. And I think we're going to dive right in. So welcome everybody to Behind the Scenes at the Museum, Puppets and Activism in New York City. We are so excited to learn with you about puppets and activism and to craft with you today. My name is Charlotte. I'm a museum educator from the Museum of the City of New York. I'm also an artist in my free time, so I love making things and crafting things. So I'm really excited to be with you all today. And I'm joined by some other people who work at the museum with me. So first, I'm going to be teaching alongside another museum educator named Jalissa.
Good morning, everyone. And like Charlotte said, my name is Jalissa. I'm a museum educator from the Museum of the City of New York, and I'm so excited to really bring this program out to you all. I'm especially excited because I did not know anything about the connection between puppets and activism. So this will be a really exciting time.
Me too. This is something that we learned from Sarah and Monxo along the way. So we are so excited to be with you all today. So again, we're coming to you from the Museum of the City of New York. And if you're unfamiliar with this museum, our job is to collect and tell the stories of New Yorkers, which really means as a museum, our job is to listen. So in this session, we really want to hear from you. And in a few moments, we're going to go over how you all can participate really actively in this session. But before we do that, I want to talk about what we're doing today. So again, we're going to be talking about puppets and activism, specifically how puppets can be used for activism. And when I use this word activism, I mean standing up for what you believe in and making your voice heard. And what's so interesting is that the methods that puppeteers use for activism connect to many movements across time in New York City. And when I say movement, I mean when activists come together and work together. So to teach us about these really interesting topics, we are joined by two curators. So a curator is somebody who picks all the objects to tell a story in a room together. This is called an exhibition, a room in a museum that has objects and artwork all relating to the same topic. So first, we're joined by Monxo López, the curator of Puppets of New York, which is an exhibition about how people create and perform with puppets on the streets, stages, and screens of New York City. Welcome, Monxo.
Hi, hola. Hi, everybody.
Thank you for joining us, Monxo. We're so excited to learn about puppets from you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's the best way to start the morning.
Definitely. And we are also joined by Sarah Seidman, the curator of Activist New York, which is an exhibition that covers over 300 years of the history of activism in New York City. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning.
So again, throughout this session, we're going to be learning from our two guest curators, Monxo and Sarah. We're going to be creating our own puppets. And we also want to hear from all of you to hear your thoughts and your questions and what you're thinking about throughout this session. So Jalissa, if participants want to share their brilliant, interesting thoughts and questions throughout the session, how can they do that?
Well, first, to participate, we have if you're in Zoom, if you're new to Zoom, you can put your view on gallery mode. So you can click that button. It should be at the top right hand of your screen. And to click that button for view, put it on gallery mode, and that's so you can see all of us as well as the screen. So next, you can also put your questions and all your thoughts in our chat box. This is a slightly different version of a Zoom meeting, since with this being a webinar, all of your cameras and all your microphones are turned off and you can only you can only use the chat to put in all your thoughts and questions. They will be coming to Charlotte and I as the panelists, and I'll be sure to take a close look at the chat box to bring out all of your brilliant thoughts as well too. And last but not least, you can also put subtitles on. So if you look at the black bar at the bottom of your screen, you should see this button that says live transcript. And if you click that button, you can click view subtitles, or view full transcript, just so you can really hear us and see clearly what we're talking about. And we also have a poll that will be attendance poll, which will be launched. And this is just to get a sense of who's in the room, who's in the session with us as well too. And Charlotte, if you can launch that poll, please. Thank you. So for the first question we're asking is how many people are watching from your device, whether it be 1 to 3 people, 4 to 8, 9 to 13, 14 to 18, 19 to 23, or more than 24. And for the second question, we're just asking how old are you? And for this, you can choose multiple answers if you are watching with someone else who has a different age. So whether it be people who are 1 to 3 years old, 4 to 6 years old, 7 to 9 years old, 10 to 12 years old, 13 to 15 years old, 16 to 18 years old, or if you're an adult. No, I went through a lot of different numbers there, but we just want to know who's with us today.
And to clarify, if you are joining with a puppet, you do not have to count your puppet in the poll.
Yes. Although puppets count in life.
Yeah, they count in our hearts. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. Thank you everybody for voting and letting us know who is with us today. And thank you, Jalissa, for explaining how our participants can share with us this morning. So now we are going to dive right into our program. And we're going to focus on 3 activist methods that puppeteers use. And we're going to learn, and as we learn, we're going to get inspiration for creating our own puppet. So first, we're going to learn about how celebrating can be a form of activism and how puppets can be used for this. Then we'll learn about how puppets can be educators and how this can be used for activism. Lastly, we'll learn about how including others is a really important part of activism and how puppets can be used to make other people feel connected and included. Now, if you want to craft along with us and make your own puppet, you definitely need 3 things. You need a piece of paper, a pair of scissors, and a pencil or a pen. Beyond that, you can also feel free to use recycled materials like milk cartons, cereal boxes, paper towel tubes, to name a few. You can also use your favorite art and crafting supplies like markers, paint, colorful paper, really whatever you want. And keep in mind that I'm going to teach you how to start your puppet, but you should feel free to keep working on your puppet even after this session ends. So if you don't finish it in the next hour, that is A-okay. So to get started, we're going to learn about how celebration can be a form of activism and how people have used puppets to do this. So we're going to start with this puppet right here named the Duke. So the Duke was created by a puppeteer named Brad Brewer, and he made this puppet based on a real life musician named Duke Ellington. And Duke Ellington was a very famous jazz piano player, and Brad Brewer made the Duke for a play called Duke's Place. So Monxo, I'm curious, why did Brad Brewer decide to turn Duke Ellington into a puppet, and how is that a form of activism?
Well, Brad Brewer started his career as an artist by being a representative of an activist group called the Black Panthers. And from there, he decided that he wanted to make visible, he wanted people to learn, especially kids, about the rich and beautiful history of African American and Black music in the United States, and especially in New York City, where he's from. And so he built this puppet to honor Duke Ellington, who is one of the greatest songwriters and jazz musicians that the city and the world has ever seen. And so Brad is committed to really, really, really making, teaching people in a fun way about all of this beautiful and rich history. And that activism, I must also say, that activism is always a collaboration between different people. There is nobody that is an activism by him, them, or herself. You need to work with other people. Activism is about trust, is about friendship, is about teamwork. And so Brad didn't create Duke Ellington or any of his other puppets by himself. People are going to see that Duke, in this case, is beautifully dressed. So that needed someone to do that. Brad didn't do that dress. He needed someone to dress Duke. And so I think there's a beautiful example of how teamwork is activism, and especially that activism that is about recognizing the good and important work of other people.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Monxo. That is so interesting. And what I think is so cool is this idea of activism requiring teamwork and working together, how activists learn from each other. So what I love is that the way that Brad Brewer is celebrating as a form of activism is something that activists in New York City have done across time and across movements. Activists have always celebrated themselves and their identity with their activism. And when I say identity, I mean something about ourselves that makes us who we are. So that's what we're going to pivot and learn about now. So on the screen, we see on the left this photograph of pins, little pins that you wear on your shirt, that activists made to share what pronouns a person used. So whether they go by he, him, they, them, or she, her. So which pronouns they use that make their gender feel good. And on the right, we see this photograph from 2017 from a day in March called International Women's Day. That happens every year. And this activist in the photo is holding this sign that says, "Here for all women, Black women, queer women, Muslim women, trans women, immigrant women, fat women, Islamic women, poor and working class women, and all other types of women." So Sarah, I would love to hear from you about what you've seen across movements, how activists have celebrated themselves and their identity as a part of their activism in New York City, as we look at these photos on the screen.
Definitely. Thanks for that question. And right, we explore so many different activists in our show, and like Monxo said, how they've worked together, or sometimes clashed and disagreed. But as we see with these pins with pronoun names and this person's sign, we all have many identities, be it who we are or what we do. And some people have been treated unfairly because of who they are and what they do. And so often with activism, celebrating identity is also about saying, I'm great who I am, I'm equal to you, I need to be treated fairly, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. And right, that teaming up with others around these questions of identity can bring greater strength and form all different kinds of communities and activist communities. So even though we see, I think in the picture on the right, we see this one person with a sign, but also that she is in a crowd of people at Washington Square Park as part of a protest of a lot of people. So that shows us again, strength in numbers.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. And I love how you said this can be a way of saying, I'm here, I'm proud of who I am, I'm equal to you, and I'm not going anywhere. I feel really inspired by that. And I'm sure our audience members also feel inspired by that as they think about how they want to make their own puppet. So Jalissa, I'm wondering what you want to know from our audience members before we work on our puppet to sort of generate some ideas about how we might want to make our own puppet.
Yeah, so when we think about designing your puppets, you can think of what is something that you love about yourself that you want to celebrate in the puppet you create. And you can put in your thoughts and your comments in the chat.
And as we're waiting for our participants to share what they're going to celebrate in their puppet, I think for my puppet, I really like to laugh. And so I think my puppet is going to like to laugh a lot because I think that that's a good thing. I think that's good for us.
I really love that, Charlotte. I want to create like a really smiley puppet for you. We had a couple comments coming in. Like someone wrote that they have an amazing family. So you might want to create a family of puppets to show that love. I love that. Someone wrote that they love dancing. So you maybe want to have a puppet that moves a lot. Someone also said they love their skin color and they want to celebrate that and help others. So you definitely like create your puppet to reflect who you are. And someone else said they want their puppet to like cereal. So create a little bowl of cereal for your puppet too. I love
These are
it.
amazing ideas. What else are people saying, Jalissa?
So another person wrote that they want to have a puppet that plays the piano. So I see that inspiration from the Duke puppet. So maybe you want to have your puppet fingers as looks like they're in movement, about to play some chords or some notes. Another person said they like colors and the environment. Ooh, I really like that. So maybe have your puppet dress up as like an explorer of the jungle or have some butterflies or a little magnifying glass with them. I really like this.
These are beautiful ideas. I wish I could see all of your puppets performing because these sound like fabulous puppets. So now that we've sort of generated some of these ideas, we're going to get started on making the body of our puppet. So I'm just going to switch my camera so you can all see what I'm doing. So here are the steps. So the first thing that you do is you fold your piece of paper in half. You fold it long ways. And I learned recently that this is called the hot dog fold. So you want to fold it so that you have two long rectangles. So that's step one. Step two is that you take your pair of scissors and you cut along the crease that you made. So where you folded in half, that line that you made down the middle, you cut that. And now what's actually cool is that you have two pieces of paper that you can use actually to make two puppets because we're only going to use one. So you can put one to the side, save it for later. And we're going to start with our first puppet. So now you're going to fold it in half, sort of the opposite way. So you're folding it along the short edge. You're going to have a piece of paper that looks like that there's a top half and a bottom half. Then, and this is a little bit tricky, you're going to fold just the top half in half again. So you're going to fold from here to the middle part. So now I'm going to do that. So now I have two shorter rectangles and one longer rectangle on the bottom. So I fold it in half once and I fold it in half again. Then the next step, this is an easy step, you just flip it over. So now again, I have my two short rectangles and my one longer rectangle. And then the last step, this is kind of a tricky one again, is this middle rectangle, you're folding this part. So I'm taking this crease and putting it on top of this crease. So I'm just folding it like this. So then it looks something like that. And then you can pick it up and hold it. And this is now the mouth of your puppet. I'm going to switch my video so I can hold it up. So now I have this puppet shape, a blank canvas to decorate. So this will be the mouth of the puppet. And you can think of this top part and a little bit below the mouth as the face, and then the rest of it as the body. And then we're going to go through how to decorate the different parts of the puppet, the face and the body. So as you keep crafting, I now want to learn about how puppets can be used for activist education. And I want to begin with this puppet named Ronaldo. And Ronaldo is from a group called New York City Kids Project. So Monxo, I am really curious about this puppet Ronaldo. So who is Ronaldo and what does he do? And how is his education a form of activism?
There, can you hear me now? Perfect. So Ronaldo, as you said, is part of a team. Again, you get the idea that things and activism, it's better done and it's more fun to do it among other people, with other people, collaborating with other people. And so, as you said, Ronaldo is part of a team called the New York City Kids Project that they have been educating school kids in New York City for over 25 years. And they have been educating kids in the city specifically about inclusion. Ronaldo is a very special member of the team because he's 10, so he's a kid himself. He's very young, but very, very mature. But he loves to dance, he loves to play baseball, and he's also blind. And so he's an expert teaching everyone, not only kids actually, that we all have different abilities and that these abilities are no reason to treat each other differently, to be disrespectful, to make anybody feel bad about themselves. We all have different abilities. One thing that is very important about Ronaldo is that his activism, part of his activism, one of the things that is very important is that him being blind does not prevent him from doing anything that he wants to do. He likes to do, he likes to do things with friends. And so one of those things, for example, is poetry. He loves reading poetry. He loves performing poetry. And so I think that that's very important for people to understand. He's super, super cute. And he was in the exhibit, one of the puppets that I got the happiest when I learned that he was gonna be in the gallery. Like, he's super, super cool as a puppet.
I love that. And it sounds, Monxo, from what you're saying, it sounds like Ronaldo might make good friends with some of our audience members' puppets who also love to dance. And maybe
yes.
puppets who like cereal too. I don't know if Ronaldo likes cereal. But
he probably does.
Probably. But I think that's really interesting too, that, Ronaldo is this puppet. He's 10 years old. He loves to dance and play baseball. And he also teaches other kids about inclusion, like you were saying, and about our different abilities, and how that's a form of activism, how he's part of a team, he's part of, helping to include others. And what I think is so amazing is that activists in New York City have been using art and something creative as a way to teach others for so long. That's something that activists in New York City so often do, just like Ronaldo. So now we're going to look at these two other examples of New York City activism and how education can be a form of activism, just like Ronaldo's education. So on the left, we see this poster, this really brightly colored poster with yellow and orange and blue that activists made to stand up for women, for women's rights. And on the left, I don't know if I said the left or the right. That was on the left. And on the right, we see this photograph of Bread and Puppet doing a puppet performance. They are an activist puppet group. So they perform with puppets as a way to teach other people about problems in the world. And this is a performance that they did in Massachusetts a few years ago. So Sarah, I'd really love to know a little bit more about how activists in New York City have used art as a way to educate, as a part of their activism. As we look at these two photos, what is the connection between using art as education, just like Ronaldo?
Yeah, art is so important, right? In teaching, as you and Monxo said, and raising awareness, but also just making a visual impact that people might really stick with us. I know for myself, I like to read, I like to hear other people talk, but really when I see something that sometimes just stays in my mind more than anything else. And activists have used all kinds of art like forever. And in our show, we show people who've created posters like the one we see on the left, performances like singing a song or writing a poem, or creating a puppet. And right, that's to teach people what's happening, to raise awareness about different topics, and right, just to make their voice heard and express themselves. So Bread and Puppet on the right is one example that makes an appearance in both Monxo's exhibit on puppets and my exhibit on activism. And they were a group that made puppets beginning in the 1960s. So they've been around for a while, that were used in plays and on the street in protests against war, specifically the Vietnam War, which was taking place with the US and Vietnam in Asia, in Southeast Asia in the 1960s and 70s. And the poster on the left also has the word Vietnam in them. So both of those pieces get at that historical moment in time. And some of these puppets were really, really big, which I think, they had small ones, they made masks, they made all kinds of things, but some of them were huge. And, people would be walking them down the street in protests and made a really big impact, I think, that people would remember and still talk about today. So yeah, I think art has always been a part of activism as one way to express ourselves and get people to notice what kinds of issues activists are, hoping to talk about and teach each other about.
I think it's so interesting too what you were saying about how it's one thing to read, it's one thing to listen to someone talk, but when you see a piece of art that has a lot of color, you see a puppet, it sticks with you. You notice it and you remember it. That's really interesting, and that's actually not something that I had thought about. That what gets remembered and how it's delivered. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah.
That's how my brain works anyway. I think we're all different, but for me, I know it's that pop of color. Yeah, it really makes an impression.
Totally. For me too. And I think that's also something that you all can think about as you're making your puppet. If your puppet wants to teach others about something, how you're going to communicate that in a way that they will remember. So we're now going to move on and think about decorating more of our puppet. But before we do that, Jalissa, I think we should hear a little bit more from our audience, because they just had such brilliant ideas about how they would celebrate with their puppet. So what else do you want to know from our participants today?
Yeah, as we learn about Ronaldo and bread and puppet theater, I'm curious of what is something that you all want your puppets to teach other people about. And you can write it all in the chat. You've all had such brilliant comments and thoughts before. I would love to hear more.
It's hard to pick after we heard such interesting stories about Ronaldo and about women's liberation, about bread and puppet. It's like there's so many good ideas. It's hard to pick one.
Yeah, I mean, we already got a couple great ideas coming into the chat. One person said manners. It's just something that we all need to teach and learn about, definitely. Another person wrote autism. Someone else wrote loving music. learning how to love yourself. This is all beautiful. Or learning how to dance as well. That's a really great one. Oh, there's a really beautiful comment. This person wants their puppet to teach everyone that everyone can get angry and that sometimes it's okay. So really teaching people about emotional health and emotional well-being is something extremely important. I love that.
I love that. I think that is so important to have your puppet help other people feel okay when they're having really difficult or big emotions. That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. You also had another person that said they want their puppet to teach people how to save the ocean and
Ooh,
mental health awareness as well too, right? So all of these big, when we're thinking like environmental justice, thinking about climate, all of these big things that we're dealing with today in the world, these are really important things that you could teach other people about through your puppets.
wow. If all of your puppets worked together, they would be such a force, educating everybody about all the important things in the world. That's great. And as you're thinking about what your puppet can teach others about, you can think about the mouth of the puppet, how they're going to talk to other people and share their ideas and share these important issues with the world. So our next step of our craft is going to be decorating the face of our puppet. And we can think about that mouth. So again, this is the mouth of the puppet. So some things that you can add to your puppet are eyes, nose, eyebrows, tongue, teeth, mustache, or anything you want, anything that belongs on your puppet's face. So to demonstrate how the face looks on the puppet, I'm going to draw a quick little face on my puppet. So I'll draw some eyes. And as I'm drawing these, I still have to decide what my puppet is going to teach other people about. So I have some eyes. I think my puppet is going to teach other people to stand up for others, no matter what their gender is, because I think that's really important. I'm going to add some eyebrows, little nose, and I'm going to add some lips so that it's clear when the puppet is talking. All right, so now I have a face on my puppet. So then when it talks, it's clear that it is a face. I'm actually going to switch my camera so that I can hold it up. So this is how my puppet will tell others that it's important to stand up for everybody, no matter what their gender is. And again, we're just taking you through the very first steps of how to create your puppet, how to think about it, how to come up with its personality. But you should feel free to keep working on your puppet, keep decorating its face even after the session ends. Monxo, I'm sure you could tell us just how long it takes to make some of these puppets, that it definitely does not happen in an hour.
I know. You need to have patience. And sometimes we commit mistakes, and so we just do it again or pause and take a little bit of fresh air, do something else, and then come back.
Totally. Yes. Absolutely. And that's also a great thing about how we have this extra strip of paper. So if you make your first puppet and you're like, I don't like how the outfit came out, or I wish that I'd done something differently, you can just try again. No big deal. Okay, so we've learned about how puppets can help celebrate and how that can be a form of activism. We've learned about how education is an important part of activism and how puppets can be educators. We're now going to learn about how including others is an important part of activism and how puppets can help include others, how they can help make people feel included. And the examples that we're going to talk about are about language. So first, we're going to learn about Teatro Saya, which is a bilingual children's puppet theater. And the word bilingual means two languages. And in this case, the two languages are Spanish and English. So being a bilingual children's puppet theater means that Teatro Saya performs puppet shows for children in English and Spanish. So We're going to look at these puppets from Teatro Saya that are in the exhibition that are part of their performances for children in Spanish and English. And Monxo, I would love for you to tell us what is special about Teatro Saya's bilingual performances, and how is this a form of activism? Ooh, you are on mute.
Yes, so Teatro Saya is a group that is actually located in the Lower East Side, where I am right now, in this very building, a very old school. And one of the things that make them really special is that they do all of their plays in both English and Spanish. And actually, at times, they also do their plays in Mandarin, because here in the Lower East Side, we historically have had so many different communities living here, and the Spanish speaking, the Chinese Mandarin speaking communities are really large in this area. And so they want to be inclusive. They, for example, this big puppet that they can see here, that our guests can see here, her name is Titania. And Titania is 12 feet tall, meaning that she's a giant. And you need 6 to 7 puppeteers to manipulate her. That's what we call moving a puppet. It's to manipulate the puppet. You need, again, teamwork and coordination to manipulate her and to make her work. And so Titania was part of a play called Sueño. Sueño means dream in Spanish, and Sueño is a translation of a play by the English playwright, the writer William Shakespeare. That play in English is called Midsummer Night's Dream, and Shakespeare obviously wrote it in English, but the team in SEA translated that play into Spanish. Why is that activism? Because it's about inclusion. It is about recognizing that people of all ethnicities, backgrounds, languages have a right to enjoy the arts, and in this specific case, theater. And so Titania is a very, very important part of that team.
That's so amazing. And what I love is that Teatro Saya decided to perform in 2 languages, exactly as you said, to include others, to recognize that there are all sorts of different people in their audience, and that they want to make them feel included, and that they want them to be able to watch and appreciate their show. And what I think is so cool is that Teatro Saya is not the only group of activists in New York City that includes others by speaking their languages. So in fact, activists in New York City have fought to include others by working to help teachers and doctors and nurses speak in more than one language so that people can understand them. So on this slide, we see on the right a photo of Evelina Antonetti, who is an activist. And on the left, we see this sign that an activist group called the Young Lords made. And Sarah, I would love for you to share with us, what are the stories behind these photos? How have activists helped teachers, doctors, and nurses speak other languages so that people can understand them? Ooh, you're on mute, Sarah.
Hi, sorry. So, right, as we've seen, activists have used all kinds of approaches to get their messages across. They've used art, they've talked about identity, and here really focusing on language, but by organizing meetings, and sometimes by doing what we call direct action, which is kind of like occupying the space, be it a park or a hospital, or maybe a school, to call attention to an issue. So on the right, Evelina Antonetti started a group called United Bronx Parents, which helped families advocate for themselves and their children in public schools, and to make schools more welcoming and supportive and inclusive, including by using both English and Spanish, both in the classroom, but also in communicating with parents and families, and sending home materials. So she focused really on schools and also helped empower, parents and students to advocate for themselves, right? So activism isn't just about doing something for someone else, but about teaching people how to stand up for themselves. And then on the left, it's hard to read here, but this is a flyer, saying Lincoln liberated for patients and workers, that was created by the Young Lords, or in part by the Young Lords. They worked with other people too here. The Young Lords were a group that fought for better treatment for Puerto Rican families and others in New York, including in East Harlem, where I am now. And they did a lot of different actions, from cleaning their neighborhood streets and calling for more sanitation trucks to clean the streets, to calling for more health services. And this flyer is about the time they took over a hospital in the Bronx called Lincoln Hospital for one day by sitting in the halls and taking up space, but not disrupting like the medical work that was going on if people needed access to doctors or things like that. But they went into Lincoln Hospital to call attention to certain things that needed to change there, including translating materials and making translators available to patients, from English to Spanish and Spanish to English, so that people were getting medical and health care that worked for them. And again, right, they worked with a lot of people on this project called Think Lincoln. And some of their demands were met, probably not all of them. There's victories and defeats all the time in activism, and that's why there's always activism happening, because there's always things that need work, and language is certainly one of them that we've seen activists in New York really have changed the way our city operates with language over time, where now we have all kinds of notices in different languages. When you go to vote, it's in different languages, or you can ask for help through a translator, and all of those things really came about through activists standing up.
That is so fascinating. And what I'm hearing from both of you, Monxo and Sarah, is this theme of teamwork, of working together, of collaborating and learning from each other. And it sounds like, Sarah, that one of the reasons why teamwork is so important is because there's always activism to be done. There's always things that can be better. There's always ways that we can improve, and that's really I think one way that teamwork comes in really handy, because you can learn from other people. You can hear different perspectives. Those are really interesting stories. Yeah, Monxo?
Yes, know that what Sarah does, for example, is educating people about the history of activism in the city. And that in itself, it's also activism. Education, learning about the work that previous generations, older people from us have done to improve the lives of all of us. It's really also a form of activism. Sometimes we feel physically tired, for example, and so just sitting down and reading and learning about what previous generations have done, it is a form of activism, because that knowledge is something that helps each one of us do our own personal activism better. It helps us educate each other Not all the education happens in school. Not all the education happens with teachers. A lot of the education happens by talking with each other. And the more information we have about what previous activists have done, not only here in the United States, not only here in our neighborhoods, but all over the world. There are activists all over the world. The more that we learn about, and of all ages, you don't need to be an adult, you don't need to be old or a senior person. You can be an activist at almost any age. And so the more we learn about that, the better. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things that Sarah does in her work with Activism New York.
Absolutely. It's what Sarah does, what you do too, Monxo. Sharing these important stories with our audience is such a treat. And I also think, that's exactly what Ronaldo does, what we just talked about, how, teaching others about something that is important to you, that is activism. And it also shows you why the work that Teatro Saya and the Young Lords and Evelina Antonetti did was so important, because it's important that when you're teaching somebody about something, that they understand you, that they feel included, that they feel welcomed, that you're saying it to them in a language that they understand, in words that they understand, and that they feel like you really want to connect with them. And now as we transition and work on our puppets, I want us all to think about that more. So Jalissa, what do you want to hear from our audience about? I'm so curious to hear more from these amazing puppeteers we have watching us.
Yeah, you all said such beautiful comments and thoughts so far. So I want to know, how will your puppets make your audience feel included, or whatever you want to teach them or want to share with them?
I think for my puppet, as we're waiting for participants to share how their puppet will make their audience feel included, I think my puppet is going to ask people in the audience how they are and how they're doing, to make it clear that my puppet cares about the people who are watching. And I think that will make the audience feel included.
That's beautiful, Charlotte. I think that is always the first step of connecting with someone, just checking up on their well-being, see how they're doing. Now, one comment come in, and this person said that their puppet will want to speak different languages, like, for example, like French or Pig Latin as well, or even Spanish, to make people feel more connected. That's really beautiful. This is a great example. Yeah, and they'll also speak English. Yeah.
Totally. So really taking after Teatro Saya and including others by speaking different languages. Amazing.
Yeah. And then another person said that their puppet will ask others what do they do to show themselves love. So thinking of people's love languages as well and seeing how they show love to themselves, how they care for themselves, that'd be awesome. Ooh, we have another person that said their puppet will be cute and friendly. I love that. Try to grab everyone's attention and make them want to cuddle with their puppet. Another person said that their puppet will make learning fun so everyone can understand and learn more languages or learn to speak more languages. That's a really brilliant one.
I love these ideas. And I love how you all are thinking about like how your puppet will interact with either other puppets on the stage or with your audience. And something that's really cool is that you can also think about what your puppet looks like, and that might make people feel more included too. So as we look at, hold on one moment, these two puppets, Ronaldo and the Duke that we looked at already, I want to point out that on the left, this puppet Ronaldo, his on his shirt is sign language for I love you. And it's hard to see in the photo, but if you looked really close, within that hand that is the sign language for I love you, it says I love you in all different languages. So Ronaldo is showing with his outfit that he loves other people. I think the Duke also has a very, he's wearing this bright colored outfit, and, it's clear that he's a performer, that he probably feels really comfortable on the stage, and that he's going to do something theatrical or musical as he performs. And that could also make people feel more included too. So now we're going to work on the last step of our craft, which is working on the outfit. And if you want, you could think about how your puppet, how the outfit that you create on your puppet might make other people feel more included. So some things that you could add. You could add a shirt, pants, a skirt, a dress, overalls, a bow tie, or again, any other thing that you want, any other piece of clothing. These are just some ideas. So I think on my puppet, I'm going to draw a button-down shirt because I really like button-down shirts. And I'm feeling inspired by the Duke. He looked so fancy, and I want my puppet to be fancy too. And then I think in order to make people feel more included, and because my puppet is going to teach people about gender equality, and I'm thinking about those pins that we looked at earlier that I thought were really cool, I think I'm going to make my puppet wear a pin. And I think the pin is going to say gender equality, so that people know that my puppet is going to stand up for people no matter their gender. And also so that people know that my puppet knows a lot about gender equality and could teach others about it. So I think that's how I'm going to make my puppet feel. That's how my puppet is going to make its audience feel included. And again, these are just some ideas of how you could decorate the body and the outfit of the puppet, but this is just to get started. Monxo, how long does it take puppeteers to make a puppet, based on what you learned in your exhibition?
It really depends. You can have, I think that people need to understand that you can use a coffee mug, a pen, a telephone as a puppet. So you can use, that's called object manipulation. You take an object, and for example, this pen can represent a writer. So rather than having a puppet, very elaborate of a writer, I use the pen and I start talking, I'm a writer, da, 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 da. So that's one. So it's really, it can be really, really easy. But there are puppets that can take up to months in doing. Okay, so it really depends. There are puppets that are used like shadow figures that are done with leather. That leather needs to be shaved, that leather needs to be curated, and that process can take months. It needs to be painted. So it really requires sometimes a lot of patience.
Absolutely.
But yes.
And it sounds like from what you were saying before, Sarah, too, that activism can take a lot of patience too, that there's always activism to be done. Sometimes it could take a really long time to, get the thing that you want. So I guess that's another connection between puppets and activism that I didn't even think of until just now. It takes a lot of patience. So as we start to wind down our program, I want to give a huge thank you again to Sarah and Monxo for joining us today. I feel like I learned so much from both of you, and I feel so inspired to make my own activist puppet. So thank you both so much again for joining us and teaching us, and in that way being an activist. It was a real treat to learn from both of you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in. And there are more puppet events happening, so keep tuned.
Definitely. And we're gonna share in just a moment how our participants can learn more about some of those puppet events coming up. So if you all want to continue working on your puppet for months and months and months, like Monxo explained, you could keep decorating your puppet. So you could add, here's one puppet that I made that has different colors and it has signs. You can also make a friend for your puppet. So here I have another puppet friend, so they can talk to each other. You can also introduce your puppet to someone. And so you could practice making other people feel included with your puppet. If you would like to submit the puppet that you make for possible consideration, to be considered for possible inclusion in a virtual MCNY Kids Art Gallery, you can find the student artwork permission slip on the event webpage, and Jalissa's also going to paste in the chat a link to this permission slip. So you have a grown-up help you fill it out, and then you send a photograph of just your puppet with the and an attachment of the permission slip to familyprograms@mcny.org. So you can find that permission slip in the chat and send your puppet and the permission slip, the signed permission slip, to familyprograms@mcny.org. You can also visit the museum if you want to see some of these puppets and activist photos that we looked at today in real life. You can visit the Puppets of New York or Activist New York exhibitions from Friday to Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's when the museum is open right now. So you can see some of these objects in person that you learned about and saw today. And lastly, we are having some live puppet performances at the museum outdoors in September and October. So Jalissa's going to post, or Jalissa just posted the link to this series. We have 4 performances. One is going to be with Teatro Saya, that bilingual children's puppet theater that we learned about earlier. Ronaldo's also going to be in one of the puppet performances. And we have 2 other really interesting performances coming up. So you should feel free to check them out at this link and sign up for one. And lastly, thank you all for joining us. It was such a pleasure to learn with you all today, to hear your brilliant ideas about your puppets. I am so excited to see, to hopefully see some photos of your puppets because they sounded really interesting. So with that, we are going to close out the webinar. Thank you all so much again. Bye, everybody.